Alright guys, look, I do want to start this video on a bit of a serious note, as I got an email over the course of the last week basically saying that my treatment of Nikita Mazepin was unacceptable, and it really is. So look, I'm going to put my hands up now. It is my bad. I want to take accountability and responsibility for my actions here, so I'm sorry to Nikita Mazepin and all that I've offended for calling him a He's actually just a cunt. Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to FP1, the channel that supports Nikita Mazepin. Totally. This week, it was time for Formula 1 to return to one of its most beloved circuits on the calendar. And by that, I of course mean Russia's SOCHI AUTODROM. However, coming into the weekend, the big story swimming around the paddock was whether we'd actually get a race weekend whatsoever, given that God decided a repeat of Noah's Ark was necessary to wipe this track off the planet. We'll get into that and the rest of the news in just a second, but before that, if it's your first time here and your first time watching the comedy review and you end up enjoying what you see, please do help me out by clicking on that like and subscribe button down below. 70% of you aren't even subscribed, so if you could help us try and hit that 50,000 goal by the end of the year, I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, with my desperate pleading out of the way, let's get into the comedy review of the Russian Grand Prix.
Противник на юге, они атакуют с юго-востока. Зависим противник на юго-западе.
So, yeah, as I mentioned, the weather situation coming into the weekend was, well, not great. Monsoon-like conditions were expected throughout the course of the event, flooding the paddock as teams set up their garages. And though the thought of this at the start of the season would have got us all excited, after what happened at Spa, I think the mention of rain just gave us all PTSD flashbacks. We also had some driver market news coming into the weekend, with the shock announcement that Haas and Aston Martin would retain their driver lineups moving into 2022. Good news for the channel then, as I get another year of ripping into this guy on a weekly basis. Finally, Helmut Marko came out claiming Lewis Hamilton was faking his injuries after Max Verstappen's Red Bull got a bit horny and mounted #bless Mercedes last time out in Monza. But let's be real here. The guy can't see out of one eye, so who really cares about his opinion? With any future job roles at Red Bull, for me now firmly off the table, let's jump into the weekend's action, starting with first practice. Valtteri Bottas may just be the one person besides Vladimir Putin who actually likes the Sochi circuit, topping the times at the track where he recorded his first and to date last Formula 1 win 1 year ago. And yeah, it really has been that long since Porridge Man sat on the top step. People wonder why George is replacing this guy. Hamilton would make it a Mercedes 1-2, with Verstappen in hot pursuit, the Dutchman opting to start the race from the back, having taken a new power unit for this weekend. FP2 would continue to be a Mercedes affair, with Pierre Gasly rounding out the top 3 in his AlphaTauri, despite his front wing turning out to be held on with blue tack late on in the hour. #Blessed also mistook his front jackman for Max Verstappen, and had a go at human bowling as he pulled into his pit box, while Antonio Giovinazzi showed his team why he should be retained for next season by bending his car into the wall and bringing out the red flag. And with Friday done and dusted, let's move on to Saturday and FP3. Or perhaps not, since the rain made the track about as dangerous as taking Jeffrey Epstein to a kid's birthday party. On-track action was cancelled for the morning, but a gap in the weather allowed for qualifying to still go ahead. This would be the first session held at Sochi in the wet, meaning drivers were going onto the track completely in the unknown, and I tweeted out that I thought we'd be in for a surprise pole sitter this weekend, not just realising how well that would age in an hour's time. With Verstappen not heading out due to his penalty, this plus the rain provided a big opportunity for the likes of Alfa Romeo and Haas to maybe, just maybe jump out of the bottom 5. And you know what? Speaking of, I think we all know what it's time for.
Bunch of wanko.
Look, let's be honest, we couldn't have a Russian Grand Prix without a mention of Haas watching Nikita Mazepin, now could we? It was the Haas driver's home Grand Prix this weekend, and with his new chassis since the summer break, the Russia was in good spirits heading into qualifying. Miraculously, he also hadn't spun yet, and with no controversy surrounding the channel's favourite driver, maybe we were just witnessing a turning point here. Ah, for f***'s sake, Nikita. Well, maybe Mazepin would fare better on track. Nah, who are we kidding? He was 4 seconds slower than his teammate. Also out in Q1 were the two Alfa Romeos of Raikkonen and Giovinazzi, who further pleased his team by practicing his farewell donuts for Abu Dhabi. As the track dried for Q2, the action got a lot closer, but the big losers were AlphaTauri, who decided to be the only team to stay out on worn intermediate tyres, then to the surprise of no one, didn't make it through to Q3. Lead driver Pierre Gasly was particularly unimpressed, opting to audition for the sequel of Bird Box in the paddock afterwards. Sebastian Vettel also missed out by just 0.05 of a second, as well as Leclerc and Latifi, who will join Verstappen in taking new engines for the race on Sunday. So that leaves us with Q3. And oh boy, what a session that was. The circuit was continuing to dry, and the big question facing the teams was whether to swap onto the soft compounded tyres for the final runs. The two Mercedes cars found themselves leading the way after the first banker laps, though their luck was about to run out. #Bless thought he would #bless the outside wall of the pit lane, crawling back to his pit box with only half a front wing on his Mercedes. This in turn held up teammate Valtteri Bottas, and meant the two Mercedes cars only had one lap on soft tyres at the end of the session. Everybody else had the privilege to warm up their rubber though, and with the track perfect in the dying minutes, Carlos Sainz was looking good for his maiden pole position, and one Ferrari wouldn't need a convenient red flag to ensure this time around. It wasn't quite over yet though, and Lando Norris would put in the storming lap to take his maiden pole and also make half of F1 Twitter require a new set of underwear. George Russell then proceeded to make that all of F1 Twitter by slotting his Williams into third, with Hamilton only P4 at the end of the qualifying hour. And this sets up, perhaps for the very first time ever, an exciting Russian Grand Prix, with the likes of Leclerc and Verstappen fighting through from the back, and also Hamilton trying to secure as many points as possible from fourth. So let's not waste any more time and head straight into Sunday and find out what happens. Before the race began, all the talk was around Mercedes, as they announced that Valtteri Bottas would be another to take an engine penalty relegating him to the back of the grid. Now, the aim of this was obviously due to reliability concerns, and nothing to do with holding up Max Verstappen whatsoever. Rain was also still in the air, but given F1's recent track record, obviously ignoring Belgium, I decided to make this tweet. And let's just say I'm regretting that one now. Anyway, Lando would get a good start from pole, but Ferrari's Carlos Sainz benefited from the tow and put himself into the lead coming out of turn 2. Hey, no matter what happens now, at least Carlos has the peace of mind that he's got further than he did 12 months ago. Daniel Ricciardo had a lightning getaway, however was boxed up going into the first braking zone. But the Italian Grand Prix race winner still pulled off a daring move on #Blessed, who found himself losing out on the start. And in the midst of all that, Lance Stroll had somehow slotted himself into fourth, behind Russell, who managed to retain his P3 spot despite his Williams having the general race pace of a Toyota Prius. Once the early drama settled, Lando Norris was aiming to take his P1 spot back from his old teammate, doing so thanks to the second DRS zone on lap 13, and things were looking all good for McLaren to take their second race win in a row. I personally can't see anything threatening to change that. At this point we got into the pit stop phases. Russell, Stroll and Sainz pitting early, while the McLarens and Hamilton opted to stay out despite the threat of the undercut. All the while, Verstappen was closing in on Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas putting up a typical Valtteri Bottas defense to justify Mercedes giving him that new engine overnight. Ricciardo and McLaren, suffering from a slow stop, unleashed Hamilton to close in on Norris, and as the race settled down, it was looking like a straight fight between the two Brits for the win. With the McLaren straight line speed though, it was really looking like Lando had a chance to take his first victory here, but sadly we all know what's coming next, and that tweet I made from earlier was about to bite me in the arse big time. Rain began to fall on one side of the circuit, and that was up to the drivers whether it was time to switch to intermediate tyres, with only 4 laps left to race. Hamilton and Mercedes opted to pit, while Lando decided to take the gamble and stay on slicks. All he needed then was for the rain to die down, which didn't really happen, did it? Now all hell was breaking loose, with drivers losing grip and going off left, right and centre. Aston Martin has spent the last few weekends promoting the new James Bond film, but testing out how Lance Stroll-proof their cars were, I'm not quite sure was in the script. As for Lando, Hamilton on Inters was closing in at a rate of knots, passing the Brits after Norris decided he'd rather race on the motorway besides the circuit. Verstappen and Bottas were the other big gainers from the wet finish, finishing P2 and P5 respectively, as Carlos Sainz recovered to third to take home a crucial podium for Ferrari. But after all that, Lewis Hamilton would come across the line to take his 100th Grand Prix win in Formula 1. An incredible achievement, you've got to say, at the end of the day. I will admit I'm utterly gutted for Norris, but the Brit showed his maturity today, and I doubt this will be the last time we see him fighting for a win in Formula 1. But can we just also appreciate that this was the first time we actually had an exciting Russian Grand Prix? And if that can happen, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to change my Facebook relationship status at some point. Now I'm off to go buy my Mazepin merch, but if you did enjoy the video, make sure you drop it a like and subscribe if you're new. As I said at the start, we're trying to hit 50,000 subs by the end of 2021, so if you can help out with that, I'd really appreciate it. Now I'll see you with another video really soon, but until then, have a good one.